जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय राधा गोपीनाथ श्री राधे जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा। ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र शद श्री श्रीमद नित्यलीला प्रविष्ट अभय चरणारविंद भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र शद श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील गौर किशोर दास बाबाजी महाराज की जय। नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील जगन्नाथ दास बाबाजी महाराज की जय। श्री गौरिया वैष्णव गुरु वर्ग की जय। नमाज श्रील कृष्णदास कविराज ठाकुर की जय। श्री चैतन्य चरितामृत की जय। नमाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्री वसति गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। गंगा माई की जय। जमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। Nitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, all glories assemble devotees, Hare Krishna, all glories assemble devotees, Hare Krishna, all glories assemble devotees, Hare Krishna, all glories Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurun militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam sthapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupah Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapad Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Goratushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Welcome again to Caitanya Caritamrita class. Today I'm having a little less opulent background and a little less opulent camera and lighting. I'll be returning back to the old location sometime after next week. So next week we'll be filming in similar conditions to like this, and then we will be resuming the regular alternation between the temple and my little mini library in my apartment. So today we're going to be going over the Caitanya Caritamrita, going over the second question of the Rai Ramananda Samvad, as we have been doing for now quite a few days, quite a few weeks actually now. The total amount of Caitanya Caritamrita classes covering the Rai Ramananda Samvad have entered into the weeks if you add them all up. So, we are continuing the elaboration on the second question, and as I said before, we will be going over the second question a few times. What is the second question? Well, the second question is asking about 4 different things. Krishner Swarup, Radhar Swarup, the Swarupa of Krishna, the form, the qualities of Krishna, Radha's Swarup, the qualities and form of Srimati Radharani, Roshototo, the absolute consideration of rasa, the conclusive consideration of rasa, and Prem Toto Rup, what is the absolute form, the conclusive form, in actuality, in truth, of Prem. These are the 4 considerations of which the second question of the Rai Ramananda Samvad are inquiring about. So, we were discussing yesterday about this. We were discussing the various pramanas that were being built up, and there's been a movement. Initially, Brahma Samhita, opulence was being quoted, the grandeur, the Ishvara nature of Krishna. Krishna is the controller. Krishna whose appeal, whose attractiveness comes from his power, was discussed first. And then now, in this section, we're moving into another consideration. That Krishna who conquers even power itself through his beauty, where the highest consideration, the most attractive principle, is in Krishna's attractiveness itself, is in his beauty, is in his lovingness, is in he embodying the beauty that is really speaking of the Ananda, in Satchid Ananda Tanu. And then so, Ramananda Rai, he made a point. What was that point? That Krishna attracts everyone, even up to and including himself. And then he quotes a text from Gita Govinda. And this brings us up to the point which we were discussing yesterday, which was the question of the Gita Govinda. And there was a few things to be deliberated upon. Firstly, we were making the point that, of course, Gita Govinda is a very elevated text. Gita Govinda is on a very high platform. And therefore, if we are to start hearing mentions of Gita Govinda, we should think, this is maybe now entering into the esoteric domain. This is maybe now pushing into topics that we shouldn't broadcast so openly, and that we maybe shouldn't dwell on for too long. Actually, when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would do readings of the Caitanya Caritamrita, they would go through the whole Caitanya Caritamrita. And they would read through every single section. When they would read through this section, of the Caitanya Caritamrita, they would not make so much comment. They would merely read through and finish it. Normally, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would pause and he would elaborate on a different point. But on this, as well as some of the Gambhira pastimes and other esoteric and rasic sections of the Caitanya Caritamrita, no comments were made. And so we will be one hint even more conservative. And we will just vaguely go through these broader sections, building upon now the more rasic shastras. 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Lalita Madhava. It's either Lalita Madhava or Vidagdha Madhava. I'm forgetting now. Gita Govinda, all of these things. Now that we're entering into this domain, we will soon be going quickly through. But still, we will go through verse by verse for at least the remaining part of this section, up until we get to Radhar Swarup. So, sorry. So then, we made that point. And then we brought up the question of, why should we accept Gita Govinda as Shastra? Why should Gita Govinda be accepted as a Shastric work? And then we mentioned that the sadhu, the words of the sadhu are Shastra, when they are compiled with a certain mood of compiling Shastra. What else is the qualification to compose Shastra than to be a sadhu? Because what else is Bhagavatam? What else is Mahabharata but the recorded words of the Mahabhagavat devotees? And then we began to consider, is then the author of this Gita Govinda, is he then a Mahabhagavat? Is he a great devotee? And of course he is. Otherwise all our great acharyas, including Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, including Ramananda Rai, including then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada, wouldn't accept this as a valid text. Srila Prabhupada was so strict. Today we see so many people, they're coming up with all these random things they like to sing. Nittai Gaur, Radhe Sham, like this they're singing. But Srila Prabhupada, he didn't have much time for this. Srila Prabhupada said we should sing what the previous acharyas have sung. What have come from the devotee's pen. Even things like the poetry of Mirabai, better not to listen to. Best, the bhajans of Narottam Das Thakur, of Bhakti Vinod Thakur. The various stotras and prayers in the Shastras. We can sing these. We should sing these. The Brahma Samhita. All of these things should be sung. But here and there mixing shouldn't so much be done. So Srila Prabhupada is very strict like this. He said not to speculate, because what is the value in a speculated bhajan? In fact, the Nittai Gaur Radhe Sham, this thing was actually invented by some Sahajiyas, who believed that Nittai Gaur Radhe Sham, because they'd say Nittai Gaur, Nityananda and Gaur Mahaprabhu are Radhe Sham. So they said that Nityananda Prabhu is not Balaram, but he is Radharani. This is nonsense. And being nonsense, it was rejected. So, this is the danger of just accepting. Sometimes devotees can be like omnivores. Whatever they hear, they'll accept. They'll be very strict. No meat, fish, or eggs, or onion or garlic. They'll be very strict with this, as they should be, in their prasad. But they won't be very strict with what they hear. And they'll hear this or that, and they'll just accept it. Nitai Gaur Radhe Shyam, so if we just accept whatever, then maybe sometimes we'll accept something which is not kosher. Something which is not halal. Something which is not allowed. Something which is having some sort of poison, some rotten food. And then we will accept this. And then we've accepted the influence of some upper sampradaya, who is preaching nonsense philosophy. So we should be very careful with the bhajans we sing. And Prabhupada, even more so than the previous acharyas, was very, very strict with this. And being very strict with this, if he allows, and he did allow, and he did encourage us to sing Tava Kara Kamalavare Nakamadbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bhringam Keshavadhrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare. If he allowed us to sing this, which is from Gita Govinda, then we know Jayadev Goswami was a very, very elevated personality. So then, I thought it fitting that we should try to appreciate how elevated a personality he was. So I wish to speak some pastimes of Jayadev Goswami, especially with the intimate relationship that he has with Jagannath, which shows again how intimate his relationship with our sampradaya in the line of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. Because we know that in many ways the Ishtadev, the deity who Mahaprabhu was most attached to, he worshipped Jagannath so dearly. Because he is so attached to Jagannath, a person who is very intimate with Jagannath is surely a dear friend in heart with Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even when Mahaprabhu went on his South India tour, when he went to Sri Rangam and visited, it said he actually brought tiny deities. You can still see them. Tiny deities of Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. He brought them along with him on his travels to worship. This is how intimate and dear, how intimately dear Jagannath was to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, we then spoke of how the wedding of Jayadev Goswami to his wife, Padmavati, named because she was born as a blessing from when her parents, Dev Sharma and I'll check my notes. Dev Sharma and his wife, who I don't think I wrote down the name of, Dev Sharma and his wife, they offered a lotus to Jagannath, and so Jagannath appeared in their dream and blessed them with a daughter. And they planned to marry the daughter off as a Devadasi. But Jagannath then, when they arrived with the daughter who they were planning to offer to Jagannath as a Devadasi, he said, "No, marry her to my devotee Jayadev." And then we were discussing the pastime yesterday, so I won't go into too much depth. But anyways, continuing this, Jayadev Goswami and his young bride, they continued. They're very much exemplifying the Grihastha ashram, and they very much supported each other in their spiritual lives. And during this time, as he was advancing in his realization and his understanding, Jayadev Goswami decided to begin a new mission, a new seva, which was to compose a poem about his wonderful deities, Shri Shri Radha Madhav. A work that we will be referring to later on as Shri Gita Govinda. And while composing this, Jayadev Goswami, he would read each stanza, each verse after verse. He would read them out to Padmavati. And Padmavati, hearing this beautiful poetry, she would sing all the verses of Gita Govinda back in beautiful melodies. And And while formulating some verses about Radharani being angry at Krishna in the Gita Govinda, Jayadev Goswami, he had some sort of hesitancy. Because Krishna, he would go to Radharani in this pastime, and he would tell Radharani, I'm so sorry, and he would fully surrender to Radharani. And so, he was a little hesitant, because he thought, Krishna's lotus feet, I've surrendered my whole life to the lotus feet of Madhav, of Krishna, of Madhava. I've surrendered my whole life to those lotus feet. And truly all of the great worshipable devotees have all surrendered their lives to his lotus feet. The whole universe is surrendering, or rather should surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna. How can I then write a scene in which my dearly beloved Supreme Lord instead grabs the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, in which he grabs the feet of his devotee? How could I do this as proper? So then, Jayadev, he left his writing, and he decided to go for his daily bath. I've made this point so many times, but bathing should be a regular part of the devotee's routine. We should be taking at least 3 times a day, maybe washing ourselves. We should be keeping ourselves clean. Cleanliness is next to godliness, is a common motto in many ashrams. So, after going for his bath, Padmavati, she noticed that Jayadev, he came very, very quickly. He came very, very quickly home. Maybe he had a quick bath. He was very eager. He thought, I will now finish this. And so the poet, Jayadev Goswami, he took his lunch and went to his room. He opened the palm leaf manuscript and then he wrote the words. Smaragarale khandanam mama shirashi mandanam dehi pada palavam udaram jvalati mayi daruno madana kadanalo haratu tad upahita vikaram. O Radharani, please ornament my head with the fresh lotus buds of your feet. Those flower feet will counteract Cupid's poison and extinguish the harsh fire that rages within my heart. And after Jayadev Goswami, he went to his room. Padmavati, she sat down and she decided, I will now honor the remnants from my husband's plate. I will honor the prasad of my worshipable husband. A short while later, she saw Jayadev Goswami entering into her house. And she thought, hey, what? What's going on here? You're just coming from outside. I saw you go into the room. Did you climb out the window? What happened? How are you coming from outside? And then Jayadev, he looked confused and he said, hey, what sort of joke is this? It's not April 1st yet. What are you on about? You just saw me go into my room. I was taking my bath. And then he was even more surprised. Not even by her comments, but by looking down. He saw her eating the prasad. And he thought, what? Normally she always fasts until she has finished serving me. What is going on? And then Padmavati, she went into the bedroom and she said, no, look, Jayadev, look, you're in the room, I'll show you. And she opens the door. And going into the room, she finds that the room is empty. All that she can notice is the lingering fragrance of sandalwood and flowers. And then in Gita Govinda, in beautiful golden letters, was that verse that we read out, that Jayadev Goswami was so hesitant to write. And Jayadev Goswami, he became very ecstatic. He began to dance and cry tears of love. All the sattvika bhavas, all of the manifestations of divine ecstasy appeared in him as he realized that the Supreme Lord himself has come to help him complete his Gita Govinda. He grabbed Padmavati's plate and eagerly he began to eat all of the prasad, all of the remnants. He stole it off a plate. And Padmavati, she tried to stop him and she said, what are you doing? What's going on? And he said, this is no ordinary food. This is Jagannath Mahaprasad. Jagannath Mahaprasad is so worshipable. Mahaprabhu, when he was given Jagannath Mahaprasad on Ekadashi, he could not eat it. He could not honor it by eating it. So instead he performed full arti of it. Actually, we know it is etiquette. Whenever one receives Jagannath Mahaprasad, they should actually take their shoes off when honoring it. If we ever take, really is nice, the sweet, the sweet, I'm forgetting the name now, that sweet they make. But they make many offerings, but that sweet is the most common one that people distribute. We spoke earlier about the glories of Jagannath Mahaprasad, so I won't go into the details so much. Maybe later on, when Mahaprabhu returns to Jagannath Puri, we will speak a bit more about such details. So anyways, this is a very elevated thing. And he said this is no ordinary food. This is the remnants of Jagannath. This is Jagannath Mahaprasad. And therefore, this is the remnants also of his dear maidservant, Padmavati. By taking this prasad, not just the prasad, Mahaprasad of Jagannath, but the Mahaprasad of the great devotees, now I will receive all perfection. Please, Padmavati, in our marriage we have supported each other so much in growing in our mutual Krishna consciousness. Please do not hold me back in my spiritual development by not allowing me to take the wonderful remnants of a pure devotee as yourself. Falling down at her feet, paying dandavats to her lotus feet, he said, I am the most fallen of fallen. I have never been able to directly see the Supreme Lord. I see the deity, but I think it is just marble. I do not realize that this is Krishna before me. But you have seen Jagannath himself. That person who took the form, who pretended to be me, that was no other than Jagannath. So I worship you, because you have attained the goal of all of our lives by seeing the Lord face to face and being able to serve him directly. And in this sense also, the vow of the parents, the vow of Padmavati's parents was fulfilled. Because Padmavati's parents, they said, we will offer our daughter to you, Jagannath. And in this way, because what does Jayadev Goswami say? He says, truly Jagannath is your real husband. Krishna is the real husband of all living entities. So, in this way, this was fulfilled. Because Jagannath appeared as Jayadev. He appeared as the husband of Padmavati. And in this way, the vow of Padmavati's father was fulfilled. And so, after the text was completed, after Jayadev Goswami completed his wonderful text, and after Jagannath helped him complete it, it became very, very popular. Not just among the qualified populace, not just among the qualified devotees to relish it. Obviously, it also became popular among the unqualified devotees. But that is not a glory of the Gita Govinda. That is, it's definitely not an inglory or a bad thing or an infamous aspect, but it is more speaking about the rascal nature of unqualified people. But it is the glory that among all the qualified devotees, Gita Govinda became immensely popular. So becoming so popular among all these qualified devotees, it was not just qualified, it was not just popular in the whole Jagat. It was not just popular among all the sadhus and Vaishnavas of the world, of the Jagat. It also became immensely popular, immensely loved by the Lord of that Jagat, by Jagannath himself. Because shortly after finishing this Gita Govinda, Jayadev Goswami, being on that platform of spontaneity, he had this desire in his heart to dress the body of the Lord of Nilagiri in his Gita Govinda. But there was a problem. He had this very special desire. He needed to do it. But how can you put a book around the body of Jagannath? How can you do this? How can you place palm leaves? Back then, it's not that they were to take a book like Caitanya Caritamrita. That would be hard. But even if one was to take out the individual pages, like the palm leaf manuscripts, how could you wrap it around the body in a way that would be pleasing and would feel nice? So he decided, instead I will go to the weavers of my village, Kenduli, and please weave, and he would request them, please weave this Gita Govinda into a cloth that we can decorate the transcendental body of Jagannath with. Happy at this having it happened, Gita Govinda, he began to sing the Gita Govinda. Jayadev Goswami, he began to sing the Gita Govinda, while the weavers began to listen and wove the words in. So Jayadev Goswami, he would sing to them, and hearing the lyrics, they would, hearing the lyrics as if it's a song, but hearing the transcendental Shabda Brahman, hearing the transcendental sound vibration, they would weave it into the cloth. While this was happening though, Jayadev Goswami, he was feeling so ecstatic, explaining all of these things, he fell into samadhi. And the craftsmen, all the weavers, they had to stop and they had to wait for him to exit samadhi. And while they were waiting for this to happen, a Brahmin came by, and he was playing an instrument made of coconut shells. So using coconut shells, the Brahmin was playing sort of a kirtan. And he was singing a verse of Gita Govinda, because it was becoming very popular already, even after it just being finished. The great devotees were. And so he sang the exact same verse with his coconut shells. This roaring kirtan. And which verse did he sing? He sang that very self-same verse which Jayadev Goswami sang before entering into samadhi. Then the weavers, recognizing this, they thought, oh, wait a second, hopefully this Brahmin doesn't fall into samadhi as well. Hopefully Jayadev Goswami doesn't fall into deeper samadhi. And they asked him, they said, who are you? How do you know this verse? And then the Brahmin laughed, and he said, do you think this verse is unknown to me? You think I don't know this verse? Because they were shocked. Because this was immediately after Gita Govinda was written. It was somewhat known, but not really. It hadn't really had time to really spread out. It hadn't really had time to have its fame be well known all around the world. So how did this Brahmin know? And so then he said, you paused your work, you stopped doing this. You stopped weaving together this cloth. But don't worry, I don't want you to waste all your time waiting. I will sing for you the remaining verses, the remaining words of the Gita Govinda. Do not wake Jayadev up. Don't wake him up, no need. He will come around when his samadhi is broken. When his samadhi is not broken, but when the ecstasy is reducing, he will come back to his external consciousness. Do not worry. I know this Gita Govinda because I'm the older brother of Jayadev Goswami. My name is Krishna Dev. And then he began to sing. And he spoke something very, very rasic, a very beautiful rasic verse. This verse I will not sing. The other one was pushing it with rasicness, and this one is over the edge. So we will continue. We'll just know that he sang the verse. And as the rattling of the coconut shells and the melody of the song entered into Jayadev Goswami's ears, suddenly his samadhi was broken. And bewildered and astonished, he said, who is singing the verses that are hidden in the walls of my heart? And at that moment, the Brahmin, he took his coconut shells that he was playing with, and he put them down, and then he vanished. After hearing about this, Jayadev Goswami, he was thinking, who was this Brahmin? Surely he could be none other than the Supreme Lord himself. And why would he think that? Because after hearing the story from the weavers, Jayadev Goswami, He said, I don't have a brother. And the thing is, the knowledge of Gita Govinda is spread around. Maybe people know I've written it, but I have never spoken it to anyone besides my wife. The only people who know its verses are myself and Padmavati. The only person who could even say that they that they already know the verses are the people who are the people who lived out those pastimes. So who else could it be but Jagannath himself? And so he said, "O great weavers," and he paid obeisances to the lotus feet of these weavers, and he said, "I have never seen Jagannath face to face. I have never seen the Supreme Lord face to face. Only in his murti form. I have not seen the Supreme Lord face to face, but you have achieved the glorious goal of your life, of being able to see the Supreme Lord face to face. And you were able to what? You were able to serve him by hearing him sing the kirtan and hearing him sing the beautiful glories of his devotees. Surely you are the most blessed and fortunate souls." So after doing this, he again lamented. First Padmavati, now the weavers. I'm always missing opportunities to have darshan of the Supreme Lord. After this, the Gita Govinda, it is in 12 chapters. And so 12 saris were made. Each sari had a chapter of Gita Govinda on it. And when it was ready, Jayadev, he waited for Ratha Yatra. And he said, I will offer these garments, these 12 saris, I will offer them all to Jagannath at Ratha Yatra. So these saris, they were completed during the period after Snan Yatra, the 2 weeks following Snan Yatra, called Anavasara. And so after they were completed, this 2-week period, there are bamboo screens that hide away the deities. We know, even at our ISKCON Sydney temple, after Snan Yatra, we are not having the darshan of Jagannatha Swami, Baladeva and Subhadra. So they are hidden away. And actually this temporary room, when they are hidden away, is called Anasara Ghar. And so anyways, we know these things. We know he's hidden away. Anyway, so the 10th day after the Snan Yatra, Jagannath, he came in a dream to Gajapati Maharaj. We were speaking, the various kings of Orissa, they exist. They all have very nice position, very nice pastimes as devotees of Jagannath. So Jagannath appeared to Gajapati Maharaj and he said, "My devotee Jayadev, he's made a very special kandua to wrap around my body. Please get that outfit from him and offer it to me in the Anasara Ghata, in that enclosed area in which people are not allowed to enter. I would like it that you were to be able to take this from my devotee Jayadev and offer it to me." And so like this, the king of Orissa, he was very happy. The king of Puri, he said, "Okay, I will do this." And he went to Jayadev and he brought him and he said, "Please bring this kandua. Please bring this cloth that you have made. Please bring it from Kenduli and bring it here to Puri." And so there was a grand procession that was made. And the head priest took the cloth embroidered with the Gita Govinda from Jayadev and placed it on Jagannath. And Jayadev, having this desire in his heart fulfilled, he began to become ecstatic. He was so elated and happy. And he told the king that this Gita Govinda, one verse has been spoken directly by Jagannath. And this embroidery here was completed by the mercy of Jagannath in the form of the Brahmin Krishna Dev. And the king, he began to become overwhelmed with ecstasy. He began to feel so much love for Shyamasundar Jagannath. And he said, from this day on, from this day on, the Gita Govinda Khandwa, this cloth embroidered with the Gita Govinda must be offered to Jagannath every evening at the time of Boro Shringar Vesh. If there's any difficulty in weaving the entire poem of Jayadev into the cloth, if it is impossible to embroider the entire cloth, then at least this one phrase, this one shloka, this one stanza which was directly spoken by Krishna, by Krishna Dev, this one at least should be embroidered and offered every night to Jagannath. Because this Boro Shringar Besh, this is the last cloth, this is the last one in the daily deity dressing which is offered. So, this must be done. And from then on, even up until this day, this tradition has continued. So we can see that Gita Govinda has a very special place in Jagannath's heart. And because of this, Jagannath, his heartstrings are very much pulled, they're very much plucked by Jayadev's composition. Jayadev's work has made Jagannath so entranced, so enchanted by this text, that whenever Padmavati, whenever she would sing the Gita Govinda, Jagannath would actually leave the Sri Mandir. He would leave the Sri Mandir and he would go to hear it being spoken by Padmavati. Some people, they say that it was by an old woman who had heard the Gita Govinda. But either way, the purport of this is this was so enchanting. This singing sounded so nice. And not the singing because of the tunes, but because of the words. It was so beautiful to Jagannath's heart that he would leave, he would abandon Mahalakshmi Devi. He would abandon all of the countless people who are constantly engaged in the worship of Jagannath. And he would leave all of these things. And he would follow the sweet voice of the singing of Gita Govinda. And he would only return once the singing was done. When the singing was done, then he would return to all this other opulence. But before that, he would not leave. And on one occasion, Padmavati, she was collecting eggplants in the field. Yummy eggplants. Some people don't say eggplants are not allowed for Gauriya Vaishnavas, but there is some debate. Srila Prabhupada seemed to allow eggplants, and His Holiness Jai Pataka Swami was saying the reason why there is some debate is the word which says we cannot eat eggplants, it can be understood to mean a variety of things and may refer to another type of vegetable. And not eggplants itself. Or maybe a very specific type of eggplant, which is not so commonly eaten. So, there is some dispute. But some devotees, they do not eat eggplant. And that is fine. That is the interpretation they have, and we can say all glory is to their interpretation. It is not that every time people have a different approach than the approach we have, it is not bona fide or anything. Definitely we won't be taking their approach. We will be taking the approach that we have received and we have understand through Guru Parampara, but we can still, it's not to say that their approach is wrong, it is just a different flavor, a different mood, a different understanding of the detail, not of the principle. The principles and the essence are always the same. Anyways, so she was collecting eggplants in the field. And so, while doing this, she was singing the Gita Govinda. And Jagannath, he was following around this eggplant area. And so, going through, he was so much enchanted by hearing this Gita Govinda being sung, that his yellow garment was being pricked and being torn by the thorns of the eggplant bushes. And Padmavati, she could feel that someone was following her. But every time she would turn around, she would see no one is there. And she went on doing this and then singing the verses. But then she thought, no, somebody's behind me. And she turned around, but no one was there. And then she was thinking, somebody's definitely following me. And she could smell this is the smell of sandalwood coming from behind. And she thought, okay, there's definitely someone behind me. And she turned around, and no one was there. And so she was very, very confused. And then she went forward, and then she took another step forward, and then she turned around again, and this time she turned around quickly. And merely all that she saw was the shadow of a figure that vanished almost instantly. And in the place where the shadow disappeared, Padmavati, she found a guna, a nose decoration. This is a nose decoration that is used to decorate Jagannath's nose. So, this nose decoration, which is used to decorate Jagannath's nose, Jagannath in his rush to disappear because Padmavati turned around, he dropped it. Of course, understanding that the person following her could only be Jagannath if he leaves this guna behind, she touched it to her forehead and she paid obeisances to the Supreme Lord. Shri Shri Bhagavan Jagannath Ki Jai. So Sri Jagannath, he was on his jeweled throne in the temple. And that day when the king came to see the deity, he saw, what did he see? He was shocked. He saw Jagannath. Your yellow garments, they're torn. And where is your guna? Where is your nose earring? Nose earring. Where is your nose decoration? And he went to all the pandas, furious, and he said, what's gone on? Has somebody been giving second-hand clothes to Jagannath? Has somebody attacked Jagannath and stolen things and torn up the yellow garments? What has happened? Very angry, the king stormed away and was thinking, what will I do? And all the servants, they became very, very afraid. They thought, how will we be punished? What will happen to us? And like this, very, very much afraid, very, very much worried, they went away. But the king, in his sleep that night, as Jagannath really, really seems to like to do, he appeared in his dream. And he said, O king, O Gajapati Maharaj, O my beloved king, and even more so my beloved devotee, whenever someone sings Gita Govinda, I cannot help but run there. And Padmavati, she was so innocently singing Gita Govinda in the eggplant field, so I had to follow her. And this is why my garments, they are so torn. And my whole body, forget about my garments, my whole body has been pierced with thorns. Pierced like this, I am in this condition. Do not blame your servants. Unless I hear Gita Govinda, an offering is not tasteful. Unless I hear Gita Govinda, I find it difficult to go to sleep. The king suddenly woke up. At daybreak, he went to the cottage of Jayadev and Padmavati and pleaded with the poet to sing Gita Govinda in the temple. Jayadev Goswami, he gladly agreed on the condition that his wife Padmavati would also be allowed the opportunity to serve the Lord of the universe. On the order of Jagannath himself, Gajapati Maharaj officially ruled that the recital of Sri Govinda, Gita Govinda, should be implemented in the Sri Mandir. Singing together with dance performances in the morning and recitation accompanied by musical instruments during each offering of bhoga and at night. And in this way the transcendental verses accompanied by the beautiful music and dancing of Padmavati became famous and became an essential element of the worship at the Sri Mandir, and therefore became a key element of everyone's visits to see and to have darshan of Jagannath. And so like this, Gita Govinda has become a standard element. Have become a standard element of worship of Jagannath Swami. So, since it became codified by the king of Orissa and became such an essential part of the worship, in the following centuries, the fame of this Gita Govinda became now very fast spread and very well known. And so many of the kings actually, they would compose their own poems. And people, or other people, they would try to imitate. And they would perform these imitations. And there was one later king of Puri, and his I forgot his name, but he composed a text similar to Gita Govinda, called the Abhinava Gita Govinda. And he wanted to introduce it as a replacement for Jayadev's Gita Govinda. He said this text will be replacing Jayadev Goswami's Gita Govinda. So, who actually this king was, we don't actually know. Some reports say one king, that's the king I was trying to remember the name, I've forgotten the name of. Others say it was the father of Maharaj Prataparudra, but we don't actually know. So, who knows? Anyway, so he tried to introduce this instead. However, in the book written by Madhva Patnaik, named Vaishnav Lilamrita, when he did this, the royal priests decided to solve a controversy which had arisen. Because when he decided to propose this, we know how conservative devotees can be and how conservative devotees actually should be. And so the priests, they were rather scandalized by this, and they weren't sure who should be singing, what work should we be singing? The king's work or Jayadev Goswami's work? And so they decided to resolve this by placing Gita Govinda and Abhinava Gita Govinda, both texts in the sanctum sanctorum, in the intimate place of where the offerings are made to Jagannath. And that evening, as every other night, they bolted the doors shut. On reopening the temple, when they entered the next day, the next morning, they found that the pages of Abhinava Gita Govinda were scattered all around the floor. They were scattered everywhere. But the pages, the palm leaf manuscripts of Jayadev Goswami's Gita Govinda, they were held by Jagannatha Swami close to his heart. Jagannath Swami, he held them up to his heart, very much making clear which one he would like offered to himself. So, in this way, it was clear. Jagannath made the point very, very clear that Gita Govinda, even compared to other poetic works, has a very special place in Jagannath's heart. This is another pastime showing how Gita Govinda, and therefore Jayadev Goswami, is very dear to Jagannath. And the king, upon hearing this, he felt Jagannath is saying that I am not his devotee. Jagannath, he has rejected me. And the king became very upset. And he gave up food. And he was planning, now I will kill myself. Now I will commit suicide. However, that night, again, Jagannath loves to appear in dreams. And he appeared to the depressed king. And he said, "Oh, Maharaj, Jayadev is my dear servant. And his devotion has no comparison in the world. His Gita Govinda gives me immense pleasure. My desire is that you arrange for his songs, not yours to be recited before me. I am not trying to insult you, king. I am merely emphasizing that Jayadev Goswami has a special place in my heart compared to any other devotee in the world." And when the Lord appeared in this dream, the king, he felt consoled. He felt consoled. He felt consoled, and he felt, okay, in this way, now, I have still been given some service. It is not that Jagannath has rejected me. Jagannath instead only wants to accept his dear devotee Jayadev Goswami. However, Jagannath is so merciful. He has appeared in this Kali Yuga so mercifully. And so Jagannath still, he allowed 12 verses from the Abhinava Gita Govinda to be added onto the Gita Govinda in the worship of Jagannath. So in this way, we can find that there was some consolation that was made. And so scholars, they will call these interpolated verses. And they are interpolated. they were added by this king. Because Jagannath, he said, okay, I can see that you still had some desire to please me. It wasn't for name and fame that you did this. He saw when the king was lamenting, when the king was upset. So Jagannath gave him some consolation. So, although it is certain that the recitation of Gita Govinda and Jagannath Mandir was from time to time discontinued, unfortunately this is the case. This is the case that at times it is not, even though the recitation continues to this day, it didn't continue without stop. There were some unfortunate pauses. But the fact that it is continuing today, some other traditions ended. The Devadasis we do not see anymore. So many traditions ended. But Gita Govinda's recitation continues and continues and continues. This is showing that whenever it leaves, Jagannath Swami does his best to make sure that it can be brought back. Jagannath Swami does his best to make sure that it is brought back, and because it is so pleasing to him, he always arranges for it. Again, we can understand the glories of Jayadev Goswami's devotions and of the Gita Govinda. So, an example of this was when there was a king, Choda Ganga Dev, the first Ganga king, one of the lines. There's different lines of kings of Puri. And so he was the first Ganga king, famous for starting the construction of the current temple in Puri. And he introduced the practice of Nam Sankirtan. So, Nama Sankirtan, of singing the names of the Lord, wasn't done before in the temple. But he introduced this. And this pastime is bona fide. This is a fact. This is not a local tradition. This has been said in the book Prapanamrita, which is not the Prapanamrita that was published by the Gauriya Math, but the Prapanamrita which was written by Anantacharya, which is a biography of Ramanujacharya. And earlier in the Caitanya Caritamrita, Prabhupada quotes this book throughout his purport. So we know it's a bona fide book. So he introduced the chanting of Nam Sankirtan. And historians, they accept that the recitation of Jayadev's poetry began during the time of King Chodaganga. During the time of Bhimadev, a dance hall was constructed for the performance of Gita Govinda's music and dance. This Bhimadev was not a Ganga king, but there was another Bhimadev, whose name was, he was a Ganga, and his name was Ananga Bhima Ganga. So he was another Ganga king. And he also allowed and brought back the prominence of Gita Govinda by enlisting the singing, accompanied by the dance of Devadasis, among the 36 different services which were regularly performed for Jagannath. So he made it so essential it was listed as one of the essential activities that were being performed. But even after the Ganga dynasty ended, the later kings also would keep on pushing for it to come back, for it to come back, for it to come back. The great devotee of Mahaprabhu, who we will hear about later in Caitanya Caritamrita, Maharaj Prataprudra, he actually banned the singing of any other song besides Gita Govinda, in order to emphasize the prominent role that Gita Govinda should play. Regulating the times and occasions for singing Jayadev's lyrics, regulating the times and occasions for singing Jayadev's lyrics for the Lord of Gita Govinda, his commands are contained in an inscription engraved on the Sri Mandir in the old way of writing Uriya, in ancient Uriya. And it says that at the time of every offering of bhoga, and from evening worship till the Boro Shringar Besh at night, only the Gita Govinda is to be recited, accompanied by dance before the Lords. 4 Vaishnava singers, especially appointed, would only sing the Gita Govinda. Any sevak who disobeys this and allows singing from any scripture other than the Gita Govinda, or permits any other song to accompany a dance, shall be treated as a sinner against Lord Jagannath. So here we find, at times, yes, it is true that that devotees of Jagannath would not hear Gita Govinda being recited. It is true that at times Gita Govinda was not being sung, but the kings would always push to bring it into a prominent role, because the kings, in many ways, they are the representatives of Jagannath. This is the local tradition, and maybe at times we will find not so good representatives, but at many times we do find good representatives, and Jagannath guides them accordingly to guarantee that they are guided properly, that this most pleasing recitation of Gita Govinda can be performed. And why is this recitation pleasing? Why is this recitation valuable? This recitation, the recital is valuable because of the devotion that Jayadev Goswami has. So on that note, we will conclude for today. We will continue hearing some more of the glories of Jayadev Goswami and his Supreme Lord Jagannath. And we will hear again the glories of Jayadev Goswami, and then therefore the glories of Gita Govinda. And then we will continue our discussion of the Rai Ramananda Samvad. Shri Shri Jayadev Goswami ki jai, Shri Gita Govinda ki jai, Shri Jagannath ki jai, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Rai Ramananda ki jai, Shri Rai Ramananda Samvad ki jai, Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Thakur ki jai, Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai, Nittai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Krippasindubhyaiva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.